On to question number 2. This will also have a 60-second answer. Let's start with John, maybe the first to answer. It is anticipated that the state will be forced to make some drastic budget cuts due to the state of Illinois' dire financial situation. How would you balance our budget if the state were to cut our portion of the state income tax in half? And as a helpful hint, the 2015 budget expects that we will get $11.5 million from the state of Illinois as our share of the income tax in this coming reading this year.
Wow.
60 seconds.
60 seconds.
How would you fill this big hole?
We're somewhere in the nature of $5.5 million. Well, let me back up and say that one of the goals over the last several years was to make sure that we had some reserves and some significant reserves. That was a result of 3 rounds of budget cuts, eliminating 100 positions, eliminating departments, merging departments, and also the tax increase in 2012, because I know you know that very well, Chuck. But we have some reserves. That would be the first thing, as we did in 2010 when the economy tanked. We didn't raise taxes. We went to reserves. We went to cutting and using the money we have. But what we've done the last several years, which we may have to forego going forward, is we cut every year at the end of the year. When we set a budget for next year, we've looked at what's happened, and when we have extra earnings or extra income above what we anticipated, we've cut the property taxes $9 million over the last 4 years or 5 years. And also quickly, just to point out, this year we froze the increase in the water rates. I mean, those kinds of things we would do.
Andrew?
$5.5 million seems like a large amount to have to handle, and it is. Every $100,000 is $1 per resident in Elgin. But we're looking at a budget that, with all the subunits in it, is over $300 million. Just cutting 1.5% is what we're talking about. So going to every department and saying, hey, let's try to cut 2% out of our budget. Well, that's actually going to leave us with a surplus then. Going and saying, hey, here's an unnecessary expense. Yes, we can replace something for $300,000 now. Well, if interest rates are favorable for it, go ahead. But if it's going to cost too much right now, and it's not something that we need, then we can cut it for now. We can wait. Focus on the needs, focus on public safety, and focus on cutting expenses where possible. $5.5 million can be covered by reserves, but we shouldn't count on reserves every time to save us.
Again, I will use an example from my business experience, from my private sector background. For example, this month, it's a terrible month, and historically in our industry, it's a very low revenue month and time of year. And I had to sit my department heads down the other day and say, look, this is the situation. The revenues are down by X amount %. We're going to have to try to find some reductions in your departments. It's not going to be pretty. It's not going to be fun. But this is all about, it all simply goes back to wants versus needs. And we all want great, amazing things for our community. But with situations like this, you simply have to pick apart what makes the most sense, where to reduce, what not to. Staffing levels, you look at supplies, you look at all these various items that make up your budget, and then you make an educated decision within all the departments.
If we were to cut $5.5 million from our budget tomorrow, a couple of key areas that I would actually look at. One would be I would actually go back to the community and want to have a discussion about the leaf breakout program. I'd like to see if that would be something that where residents with some understanding would be interested in cutting back on that. I'd also look to invest in some additional salt domes. Adding additional salt domes would actually reduce the amount of cost because our routes would be, we would be able to reduce routes from our snow removal. Other things I would like to do is relook at our arbitration, how we arbitrate some of our union contracts. This would be specifically a plea that we will go to the arbitrator with. We just lost half of our income from the state, from this portion. We would be able to arbitrate and be able to get a lower increase in union contracts would be my goal. Those are just some of the areas that I would specifically look at. But what I would not want to do is hand that $5.5 million back into residents' lap. I think there's enough room for us to tighten the tighten back a little bit and double down, I think we would be okay.
I think the city's going to have to slow down capital projects, maybe not do as many big purchases as they do yearly. Stop lending money to the TIF fund from our general fund, like we just lent $5 million to. I think the leagues are running about $800,000 to do citywide, and like everybody else is saying here, you've got to tighten your belt. Find where the cuts can be made. You have to do it in business, you have to do it in your household. There's no reason why a city with a budget of $300 million can't get it done.
Well, this is something that really could become a reality, unfortunately, for the city of Elgin and other communities in the state. I think the first thing I would do is look to our residents and our businesses and to help them engage in a process as we identify and prioritize where we are willing to take cuts. When 70% of your budget is related to staffing in terms of personnel and benefits, it's going to be really hard to cut a significant amount of your budget without affecting staffing. We're not a business. We don't make widgets. We provide service. And in order to provide service, we need people to provide those services. It would be, in my opinion, that I would want the residents to help prioritize what services, whether it be leaf pickup, snow removal. I'm not personally comfortable with snow removal changes, but I really think we would just have to reallocate and reprioritize where we're spending our money. I think we spent down most of our reserves, so reserves are really not an option at this point. Thank you.
Well, in one word, painful. I mean, anytime you go through austerity and budget cuts, and Lord knows I've been through many of them over my 40-year career at AT&T and IBM. A lot of times what the employer will do, and Elgin employs people, especially in some circumstances, non-union folks, is that we would do targeted buyouts that could reduce staff and could also reduce health care and pension payments out the door. Arbitration is always a touchy subject, and union members do not like to pay more for health care or their pension contributions. As time goes on, especially with this big pension deficit that's building, we may have to ask, particularly some of our new employees, to contribute more, and that could save some money. Now, Jamie brought up a good idea about leaf collection, whether it's 500 or 800,000. That is something that I think should be looked at, regardless of whether we lose tax revenue or not.
We have expenditure problem in the city. The average income, per capita income of a citizen in Elgin is $23,610. But the 200 employees at the city hall make more than 100,000. So there is something to be done at the compensation rate. Maybe it is required. Maybe it's city is so complex to run that we have to have that high salary people. But something to look at because 70% of our staff dollars go for the salaries. And there are expenditure, I believe, that could be reduced, and we need to have a very hard look at that. Thank you.
It's really about prioritization. That's what you have a budget for. A budget is based on priorities, and if money changes, for instance, if the state, this should frighten everybody, cuts income that is given to the cities and municipalities by half, it's sickly. A fiscal issue at the state level, which is what we've been encountering and dealing with as municipalities, where we send money down there and then they don't send it back in the portions they're supposed to. So we've got an issue where you're in a state that's dysfunctional, and so the municipality has to wrestle with that. But what you would do in any case is what you all have to do. You would take a look at your budget, you would see where you have some things that you may have to realign, and if it requires us to go to the citizens to change that, we will. If it's a call that the council has to make, we'll make that call. That's why you would elect us.
And so it's really about prioritization, monitoring your budget, monitoring your revenues and expenses, and aligning those when you have changes.